Hello ladies and gentlemen, today we're back in War Thunder looking at the PB4Y-2 Privateer. This is another new plane which was brought to us in update 1.69. It is a 4-engined heavy American bomber sat at the battle rating of 5.7 rank 3, and it's, well, not very good to be quite honest. I apologize if you hear the scratching in the background. That is one of my hard drives slowly dying, so please ignore it if you can hear it. But the PB4Y-2, when it first was on the dev server, it was put at 6.3, and I compared it to the B-17, saying it was going to be useless. Now, a lot of people pointed out to me that it is a modified B-24, which I already knew, but as we know in game, nobody ever flies the B-24. So comparing the PB4Y to the B-24 when it comes to how it will perform in game is completely useless to me. At the when I look at a new plane, generally I try and stack it up against some of the best vehicles that it's going to go up against, and also vehicles that it's going to be competing with to see if it's useful. So you never see a B-24D in game in a realistic battle, but what you do see are the B-17s. You see the G, you see the B-29, and you also see the earlier B-17s. So disregarding the B-24, we have to compare it to the B-29 when it sat at 6.3, which was completely ridiculous, and also the B-17Gs and the B-17Es, and I've got to say, I personally believe it's worse than all of them. Even though its bomb load is not too bad, you can get up to 8 1,000-pounders, which sounds absolutely wonderful. That's basically nearly the same as everyone else. The B-17E is sat at 6,000 pounds, and the B-17E/L is also sat at 6,000 pounds. The B-17G, which is 0.3 higher, the same BR as the B-24, has that 8,000 pounds, so it is the same, and of course the B-29 has that monster bomb load. So, what do we get from the PB4Y compared to its other compatriots at 5.7, namely the B-17E/L? We get 2,000 pounds more of bombs, which basically equates to being able to drop 2,000 pounds worth of bombs on pillboxes or AA while you are going towards the base to bomb it before you can open it up for the airfield, because this thing is a base bomber, just like all of these other American planes around this BR. So that's what you're getting out of this machine. What are its downsides? So its upside is that it has 2,000 pounds more of bombs compared to the B-17 that it sits the same BR at. I suppose you could call it an upside if you wanted to. It has more protection on the top of the machine. It has 2 turrets with 2 12.7mm Browning machine guns respectively, so you have really good top cover in this thing. You also have the dual 12.7s at the back of the machine and also at the front, and also the 12.7s at the side. So generally you have quite a lot of cover when it comes to the top of this aircraft. So that could also be seen as a positive. So there are your 2 positives. I'm not going to give you any more, just because I don't think there are any, to be quite honest. So starting off with the negatives of this aircraft sat at 5.7, it is extremely slow compared to its counterparts that you can use. The B-17E is over 100 kilometers faster than it, so is the B-17E, and this is looking at them both being fully upgraded. The B-17G is basically the same speed as the B-17s, and even the B-24 is slightly quicker than it. It's pretty close, but I suppose you could call it negligible. So it is the slowest heavy bomber that you're going to be using around this BR for the Americans, but it does have that slightly bigger bomb load, which slows it down even more. Another thing is that it's absolutely huge. You may think the B-17s are big. You may think the B-24 is big. Well, guess what? This is bigger. It's as simple as that. The reason what makes it bigger than the B-24 is the humongous tail on it, which I may say is incredibly modelled in game. The plane itself is beautifully modelled. The issue is, Gaijin have done a really good job at the damage model as well, which basically means that wherever you get hit on that humongous rudder of yours, it's going to fall off, and your tail is going to snap off at the same time. So you may see a lot of Germans opening up on you about 1.2 kilometers out. That's because it's very hard to miss you, since you are the size of a barn. As a lot of people have said, or at least the common phrase, can't hit the side of a barn, or can't hit the side of a barn, or can't hit the side of the barn door. Well, this thing is a barn, so you're going to have to work very hard not to be able to hit this. Also, the fact that you may look at it and think, oh, it's turrets, its turrets coverage is pretty good. Well, you'd be wrong. The two general places that people will attack you from in aerialistic, especially at the start of the battle, is straight ahead of you or straight behind you once they've done that initial pass. If they decide to come from above you and down, you actually have really good coverage. You will generally have about 650 cal shooting at them at once. Let's say they come from straight in front of you. You only have 250 cals which are able to shoot directly in front of you or directly slightly below your nose, which is the front 50 cals in the ball there. It doesn't have great range down. The depression of the guns isn't amazing, but it's good enough generally if somebody is trying to kill you. From the back, however, now one of the great things about the B-17 is when somebody gets on your tail, especially if we look at something like the E/L variant, which is the same BR as the oh my days, the PB4Y-2. It's a really rough name for me, I apologize. The B-17EL, one of the great things about it is it does have that top turret at the front of the B-17. It also has the tail turret, and it also has a little gun in the center of it, meaning that if somebody attacks you from behind, you may be able to get 5 guns on it at once. Also, the tail gunner is incredibly accurate, and you also have that ball turret at the bottom, so if somebody does attack you from behind and they stray slightly below the B-17, what can happen is you can get 4 guns easily on target. That is not the case with the PB4Y, mainly down to the massive tail. If you take this thing out in a test drive, or if you take this thing out in a mission, editor mission, something like that, just go and see the dead area where your turrets are not able to shoot. It is astonishing, especially if they take out your tail gunner, which is generally not that hard to do. He is kind of exposed, and the only defense he has is a 9.5mm thick plate, which is actually below him. Once he gets taken out, the amount of dead space around the back of the aircraft for these two turreted, well, there's 4 of them, I suppose. Let's call them the quad 50 cals on top of this plane. The dead space is basically a triangle around your rudder, so you won't be able to shoot anything that's directly behind you. Now, generally, where will people attack you from? Directly behind you. So once they've taken out that tail gunner, they have literally nothing to fear. That is why the ball turret on all of the B-17s at the bottom is so important. It isn't because you get that 360 coverage around your machine. That is useful, but it is not the main reason why it's very useful to the aircraft. It's the fact that it is able to shoot behind it, especially if the enemy strays too far one way. Now, the PB4Y doesn't have that. There is no bottom turrets to save you from this issue. So therefore, instead, you just have a massive rudder which covers a lot of your guns. At the same time, because this thing is incredibly slow and incredibly large, it is incredibly easy to hit, and the armor does not compensate for the fact that this is going to happen. There is a bunch of armor around the area, and it does actually do a really good job of protecting your pilots, but when it comes to the engines, each engine has about a 9.5mm plate. 9 out of 10 of the matches that you're going to play around this BR are going to be against Germany, or if you're lucky, you're going to get up-tiered into 6.7 or 6.3 with the B-29 on Hokkaido, and you're going to face Spitfire Mark 24s. So we're talking about some incredibly dangerous rounds when it comes to the 30s and the 20s that the Germans have. If we want to look at the 30s, the Mark 108s, or even the Mark 103s, you're looking at the air targets belts being full of that mining shot, or whatever you want to call it, the mine shot belts, which everybody always raves about. And if that thing connects, well, either your tail falls off, your engines die in one hit, everything starts leaking, or you know, you just become unbalanced if maybe they're only able to hit you with one shell. Same with the Hispanos of the British. The Hispanos aren't as good at killing this thing. No, don't get me wrong, like the PB4Y can take a beating from Hispanos or from the German 30s and 20s, but the thing is, it's incredibly hard to keep it in the air once it sustains damage. One of the biggest issues with a lot of these big aircraft, and this is accentuated by the PB4Y because it's so large, is if part of your wing, or even if you just lose one engine on one side and you have minor damage, it makes them nearly impossible to fly because of the fact that they're unbalanced. Generally, if somebody shoots me in the wing and then they shoot me in the other wing, that's a hell of a much better situation than if they just shoot one wing. And obviously a lot of pilots around this BR are pretty good at doing that. They're very good at making sure that you are not balanced, trying to aim for one side, or maybe aiming for the center fuselage where they can take out the traction and control surfaces, meaning that your tail becomes unresponsive. Also, one of the big things which is kind of nice about some of these large aircraft, like the PE-8, the B-17, especially the B-29 as well, is the fact that they actually turn pretty well even though they're quite large. And that is down to the fact that they've got a good combination of wing area and also large elevators, and they have the speed. Well, the PB4Y does not have the speed area of that equation, making turning in it absolutely abysmal. It's one of the worst in the game at turning. According to its stat card, it sits at about 45 seconds just to do one turn. That's just one full horizontal circle. And if you are damaged in any way in this machine, just don't even bother trying to turn when it comes to, you know, the conventional turn. Instead, you should try and use your rudder to turn, just because you're not going to be able to turn the vehicle in that normal way that you'll be used to. It's much better to use your Q and your E button or whatever you have it set to, just to get this thing to try and turn around. When it comes to the grind for the PB4Y-2, this is generally not something I mention, just because I normally get through a lot of planes quite quickly. But the PB4Y, so far out of this update, out of all of the vehicles, even including the tanks, which take a lot more games to do, has been the worst to spade to get all of the modifications for. The reason for this is a combination of two things. The PB4Y cannot get to the targets before Germans jump it. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, there's a lot of planes for Germany around this BR which actually get air spawns now. Now, whether you agree with it or whether you disagree with it, it is a fact that we have to deal with. We're looking at the DO335s, the TAR-152s get an air spawn nowadays, the ME262B6R3, the old school B-17 killer, all get air spawns, and they are all amazing against the PB4Y. So, and because this thing is slow, you're not going to get to your targets before they reach you. One of the things about the B-17 which makes it at least decent at doing its job is the fact that you can get to a ground base before you're engaged by fighters. Well, the PB4Y is not like that. The PB4Y cannot get to the base that it's trying to bomb before it is engaged by fighters. So, generally what will happen is I will get engaged on maybe about, maybe a mile, or maybe 1,000, let's think about this, maybe 1 kilometer away from the target when we're looking at distance from my point on the ground to the target. I will get engaged in that little pocket, which is incredibly annoying because I have to be able to look down the bomb sites to be able to bomb the target, and at the same time fend off all of the fighters that are trying to nail me, which, you know, they'll nail me very quickly if that happens. I have been able to get a few kills in the PB4Y, but generally I've just been killed and murdered without any mercy. But it's just an unfortunate thing when it comes to PB4Y. It just has that perfectly bad speed, so you don't get to the target before you are engaged by enemy fighters. I'd be completely fine with this plane if I could get to the base first before being engaged by the enemy fighters. I've tried everything in this plane. Generally, if a plane is struggling at high altitudes or it just doesn't have the speed, what you do at the start of the game is you go for a dive. Now, to its credit, the PB4Y-2 can dive up to 600 kilometers an hour, a fair old tick at 5.7 for a large bomber. But once you get down there, generally you're going to run into someone, and that someone's going to be able to kill you quite quickly. Also, because it takes you quite a long time to get to that 600 kilometers an hour, you're generally not going to be able to go and kill a bunch of pillboxes and stuff before once again getting engaged by enemy fighters. And something that also I don't really talk about that much is the fact that being a dot in the sky does make quite a large difference. One of the big ways I actually spot people in realistic is looking for dots, and generally by the size of the dot or by what the dot looks like you can generally tell what it is. Well, the PB4Y is one of the biggest dots I think I've ever seen. It is absolutely huge when you see it on the enemy team. So how do you approach this thing if you want to attack it? Well, the first thing you want to do is understand that if you want to attack it from above, then you have to negate the amount of guns that are around the place. Let's say you want to attack it from above, so you would come straight forward in front of the pilot's nose and just nail it in on one of the sides. Either nail it in the close left side engine or the close right side engine. If you are behind it, first of all you need to negate the power of the turret on the back of the PB4Y, and once you've done that you basically have free reign and you can do whatever the hell you want to this aircraft. If you're coming in for a pass, just aim for a wing. Unbalance this thing, take it out. It's very simple as that. So what are the positives overall, before I get too mad at this PB4Y? Because another thing, actually no, let's throw in another thing. The fact that the PB4Y-2 is tier 3 means that you can't even use it to grind out jets efficiently. One of the great things about the B-29, the B-17G, the B-24D even, at a lesser extent, is that they're generally quite okay to use, and they're fun to use, you know, in a defensive capacity. And also, you're able to grind out jets in it. Well, this thing's tier 3. Like, you're not going to be grinding any jets with it, because you have such a small bonus from what you're getting from battles. So you're always going to default to the B-17G, the B-24D, and the B-29A. And even at 5.7, you're just going to default to the B-17E, which only disadvantage is that it has a slightly smaller bomb load, which you don't need anyway to knock out a base. But anyway, the positives. A large bomb load for what it is. It's larger than its compatriots, you know, if you want to do it like that, then at least you get a few more bombs. Another positive, the fact that it has a decent top cover. It has quite a lot of guns looking upwards. Negatives, everything else that you can think about in the game. That's it. It's not a good bomber. It is too slow. It needs to be slightly faster, and then we can start having a chat about if it's useful or not. It also can't take off from airfields, or at least Gaijin have decided that it can't take off from airfields. You will never be able to take off in this thing at this moment in time. If you repair, you actually get an air spawn in this thing, just showing how lumbering and slow it is, especially at the lower levels when you have no modifications. Definitely the worst grind so far when we look at a vehicle from update 1.69, but I'm sure some of those later tier 5 tanks are going to want me to, well, pull my hair out. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly didn't enjoy flying this plane. I'll see you next time.